Alrighty, everybody. Welcome to our 19th episode of Brownsville Tech Live. And today I'm actually by myself. My co host couldn't make it tonight, so I'm actually by myself, but I appreciate everybody signing on. We've got a great show tonight. It's actually a follow up to last week's episode, and we're building upon that episode by talking about your credit report. And I'm going to show you ways to actually read your credit report and how to actually give you some tips on how to... Oops. Hold on one second. Hold on. Oh. Sorry about that. My green screen fell apart. Oh, man. Anyway, as I said, we're going to talk about your credit report, how to read it. We're going to give you some tips on how to dispute any negative items on your credit report and how to get them removed. It's a pretty complex process with regards to your credit report. A lot of people don't know what's on it, and we're going to go ahead and review what is on the credit report, what you need to look out for, and then we're going to show you how can you proceed to dispute items on your credit report for having removed. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with regards to the background information with regards to the credit report. And the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the virtual theater for a second. And let's go ahead and flip to our PowerPoint presentation. If you give me a second here, I'll go ahead and flip. Alrighty. So the very first thing we want to start with is the Fair Credit and Reporting Act, also known as FCRA. This was a law passed in 1970, and it was signed by President Richard Nixon. And the Fair Credit Reporting Act is U.S. government legislation enacted to promote the accuracy, fairness, and privacy of consumer information contained in the files of consumer reporting agencies. It was intended to shield consumers from willful or negligent inclusion of erroneous data in their credit reports. To that end, the FCRA regulates the collection, dissemination, and the use of consumer information, including consumer credit information. Together with the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the FCRA forms the foundation of consumer rights in the United States. It was originally passed in 1970, and it is enforced by the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, as well as private litigants. So this law was meant to protect consumers with regards to what's on their credit report. And there are various sections that talk about the credit report and the dispute of items on the credit report, which we'll go ahead and talk about as we move further. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with the credit report, we'll go ahead and show you an example of a credit report. Give me a second. All right. So basically, your credit report comes from 3 companies in the U.S. One of the companies is called Equifax. They're probably one of the oldest credit reporting agencies in the nation. It is followed by Experian. They were also known in the 80s as TRW. And the last one is TransUnion. And basically there are a couple of sections with regards to your credit report. The first section involves personal information, your name, your current address, your social security number, your date of birth, and if possible, your current telephone number. It also contains public records, and these include employment date reported. It'll typically have some of your past employers, who they are, the date they reported that you were working for them, your position, and possibly your hire date. So that is one set of public record that will be on your credit report. Additionally, there are other public records. They can include liens. If somebody files a lien against you, the public records section of the credit report will show that. Additionally, if you've ever filed bankruptcy, that will also show on your credit report. If there are any judgments against you, let's say you didn't pay a credit card and they sued you and you went to court and you lost the case, typically they'll file a judgment for what you owe plus court fees. So that will be a public record on your credit report. If you have any accounts that you didn't pay and they were sent to collections, meaning a third-party collection agency, that will also show on your credit report. The main section of the credit report deals with your credit accounts. It is your entire credit history from the moment that you open up an account till the moment that you close the account or the account is charged off. And then lastly, the last section of your credit report deals with credit inquiries. So if you go out to a bank and apply for a loan, you go to the car dealer and you're looking to buy a car, if your credit card companies run their annual credit review to determine to raise your credit balance, your credit limit, either up or down, they do that every year. And as we mentioned in the last episode, you don't want to have that many credit inquiries, because that can also lower your FICO score. Some credit reports will show a FICO score on the report. Some do, some don't. There's also other scoring methods on a report. I think the other popular one is called Vantage Score. So that's a pretty much of a breakdown of your credit report. I've got a video that I'd like to show you that actually goes into detail about your credit report, and that complements this slide that I'm illustrating right now. So bear with me while I call up the video. We've got our theater back. And we're going to go ahead and play the video. There's no popcorn today, by the way. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pause the video for 1 second. No popcorn.
Reading your credit report easily. At this time, have your Equifax report in front of you. Your credit report is divided into 4, potentially 5 sections depending on the credit bureau. The first section is your personal information, such as your name, social security number, address, date of birth, and other information used to identify you. Second, and the bulk of your credit report, is your credit history. This area includes all account history, your open accounts, paid accounts, late payments, collections, etc. Please note that some reports have collections separated from this section. The third section is your public records, which includes bankruptcy, tax liens, and judgments. The last section of your credit report is inquiries, which includes a record of every company who has asked to see your credit report within the past 2 years. Now let's examine the credit history section a little bit more in detail. Look at one of the trade lines, also known as lines of credit. The components that make up lines of credit are creditor's name, account number, date open, credit limit, loan amount for installment accounts, outstanding balance, payment history, status, type of account, ECOA, which stands for Equal Credit Opportunity Act, simply means the person who is responsible for this account. The most common coding for ECOA is individual I, joint J, authorized A. Key areas to focus on where wrong information can negatively impact your credit score: date account open, last date of activity or payment, balance, credit limit, payment history, ECOA or whose account it is, and status of account. Now let's see how the same information is shown on the other 2 reports. Here is the Experian report: the personal information, credit history, public record, and inquiries. Finally, here is your TransUnion report: personal information, credit history, public records, and inquiries. As you have seen, each report looks different, but the information should be the same. If not, this is one of the main reasons why you have different credit scores at all 3 credit bureaus. If you would like more information, please visit us at getcredithealthy.com.
Alrighty, as you saw in the video and as I explained in the previous slide, the credit report is broken into several sections as I illustrated. And basically, as I mentioned before, there are 4 or 5 sections. And the most important section is your credit history. And she talks a little bit about that as well. You know, when you open up an account with somebody, the credit report reflects the date that the account was opened. It also identifies the credit limit that was given to you at the time that you open up the account. So you would go and open a Visa and they give you $1,000 credit limit. That credit limit will show on that credit limit column. Additionally, it will show the current balance. So if you've got a credit card with a credit limit of $1,000 and you owe $500, that $500 will show up on your credit report in that column. The day that you make a payment and that payment is applied and the payment is reported to the credit bureau, that date lies in the date of last activity. And we talked about the date of last activity in the last show with regards to any account that goes into collections. And we talked about the 7-year period. And I mentioned in last week's episode that it made no sense for you to actually attempt to take care of a bad debt if you were on the 5th, 6th, or even the 7th year of owing the debt. And the reason for that is because the moment that you send in a payment, whether the entire balance, a partial balance, a penny, it doesn't matter what the amount is. The moment that you send that payment, it will update the column on your credit report called the date of last activity. When that happens, the 7-year period starts over. So if you're into the 5th or the 6th or the 7th year and you send them a payment, it will add 7 extra years before that item can fall off your credit report. And by law, it has to be on for 7 years. So instead of 7 years, now you're looking at having that account on your report for up to 14 years. So whether you want to make the decision, whether to pay it or not pay it, the determining factor is how quick do you want to have it off your credit report. And that's a personal decision that you've got to make with regards to that. But I just want to mention how important that date of last activity is with regards to the length of stay for that account on your credit report. The credit history also identifies whether the account is a revolving account, an installment loan. They didn't mention that, but there is a column that talks about the kind of account that it is. It also identifies whether you're the primary account holder or whether you have this account with somebody else. In that case, it would be considered a joint. Or if you're just an authorized user for that credit card. Sometimes parents, especially with college kids, add their children as authorized users so that when they go off to college, they've got a means to buy books, maybe pay tuition, maybe pay for food or fuel. So when you add your child to an existing credit account, their credit report will show that card, and it will show them as an authorized user. So that is the section that you have to look out for. It is the section that can make you or break you. So, and that is the section that you will use when it comes to disputing items on your credit report. So the next slide, we're going to talk about the Fair Credit and Reporting Act sections. And these sections are very important when it comes to disputing derogatory items on your credit report. So we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll move on to the next slide. All right. As I mentioned, the Fair Credit Reporting Act was passed in 1970. It has 3 primary sections that are important. The first section is Section 609. And this section addresses your right to request copies of your credit report. And it states that data records must be removed if disputed information cannot be verified. It doesn't address your right to dispute the information in your credit report. The right to dispute information is in the next section, 611. And so basically, when you're disputing an item on your credit report, it is suggested that you start with a dispute letter version 609. We've got a question with regards to, well, the question went off. Can I report buy here pay auto load to the credit bureau, and how? Could you elaborate, Mr. Villarreal, on that question again? It wasn't clear. If the question is, do you have to buy your credit report? The answer is no. You are entitled as a consumer to get 3 copies from each credit bureau annually. So you can get one from Equifax, get one from TransUnion, and get one from Experian. And the question is, why do you want to get all 3? Because an item may exist on one credit report and not the other. In some cases, it'll be on 2 credit reports and not the third one. And then in some cases, they're on all 3 credit bureaus. All right. The question is, some buy here pay their auto dealerships do not report to the credit bureau. Can they be reported independently? Well, I do not know of any auto finance company that does not report your payment history with regards to an auto loan. So I've never heard of that happening. So as far as I know, everything gets reported to the credit bureau, good, bad, or otherwise. So if you're going to dispute an item on your credit report, you initially start off with the 609. The next section, the 611A, states that the credit report agency doesn't need to show the verification method or send you written results when you send your dispute electronically. So it's pretty important if you're going to dispute something that you do it over physical letter. If you do it electronically, they don't have to return anything to you back. And then the last one is the 623. Basically, other sections of the Fair Credit Reporting Act, you have the right to dispute a debt not only with the credit reporting agencies, but directly with a data furnisher. That means the original creditor, whether it's a credit card company, a lender, a collector. Section 623 also prohibits a company from furnishing inaccurate information to the credit reporting agency. So a company cannot submit erroneous data to blacklist you. Okay? So the next section in bulletized form are the types of dispute letters that you can send off. There are general dispute letters, 609 dispute letters, 611 dispute letters, and 623 dispute letters. The very first letter is the general dispute letter, and this is generally the best type of dispute letter to send. It is a general purpose letter that is simple. There is no need to invoke any aspect of the Fair Credit Reporting Act in your letter. That means that you don't have to invoke an actual section in this letter. It simply lists the mistake from the credit bureau. You supply evidence to prove your case, and you ask for the negative item to be removed from your credit record. And on the right-hand side is an example of the letter that you would send off to the credit bureau. I will say that if you're going to send any correspondence to the credit bureau, you should certify mail it and ask for a signature upon receipt. And that is evidence in case you don't hear anything back from them or they're simply ignoring you. But the general dispute letter has a couple of items that you must include. It should include the current date of the letter, your name, your address, your email, your date of birth, your social security number, your driver's license number, the credit bureau name, and the credit bureau address. It should have a subject line that says you're disputing the information in the credit report. With regards to collectors are the ones that can come after your credit report. I'm unaware that the mob is involved in any kind of credit card collection. So not even the bounty hunter on TV can do that. So it has to be a collector certified by the state. And there's a process involved with regards to collections, what they can and what they can't do. So basically, the way the letter should read, I am requesting an investigation of the following data that appears in my file. I believe that this data is an error because, and then you state your reason. And then I am requesting for this item to be removed. You can also, if you don't want it removed, you can have it updated to reflect whatever you want it to say. You then identify the disputed item. That includes the name of the company or the creditor, their address, company phone, the account number, and the reasons why this is an error. And then you should include the enclosed documentation. It should be a copy of the credit report with the item you're disputing circled or marked. And then if you have any kind of proof that the account is not yours, you should also submit that as well to help your case. And this is the very first letter that you should start off with. It is the very first letter that a credit repair specialist sends out. In fact, as I mentioned, you don't have to pay hundreds, thousands of dollars to a credit specialist to do simply this. Create the letter, print the letter, stuff it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and drop it in the mail. The credit bureau by law has 30 to 45 days to prove that that account that you're disputing is yours. And proof doesn't mean that they look at it, they say, this guy's a deadbeat, and it's his. They must provide proof. Proof meaning that they have to produce the original contract, which includes the signature, whether it's physical or electronic. They must provide proof that the account is yours. If they cannot provide proof by the 30th day, not the 29th, not the 31st, not the 1st, but the 30th day that that account is yours, then by law, that account must be removed from the credit report. How can I stop harassing calls from collectors? To be honest with you, I don't know of a successful method to stop the collectors from calling. In my opinion, there's not much regulation when it comes to the collectors. There have been attempts federally in the past to regulate these people because they do go through extorting means to try to get people who owe to pay. And sometimes they have bordered on the borderline of criminality. But the best thing to do is don't take their calls. That would be my advice. Legally speaking, there's not much that you can do. So, unfortunately, the collector has a lot more rights than the end consumer when it comes to debt collection. The next slide will go over the 611 dispute letter, which is different from the general dispute letter. The 611 credit dispute letter references Section 611 of the FCRA. It requests that the credit bureau provide the method of verification they used to verify the disputed item. It is sent after the credit bureau has responded to a dispute that a negative item has been verified. So you send out your general dispute letter, and let's say they do come back and say the account is yours. Then your response upon receiving that letter is saying, oh well, I'm screwed, there's nothing I can do. That's not what happens. As part of your rights, the next step in your process is to initiate a 611 dispute letter. which basically states the following. Okay, Mr. Credit Bureau, you said the account is mine. How did you go about to prove it? Did you mind read? Did you have magic fairy dust? How did you come up with the idea that this account was mine? And by law, based on Section 611, they have to tell you exactly the steps that they went through to verify that the account was yours. And the letter's just like the last one. You got to include basic information. You want to include the date of the letter. That's very important because that counts. That starts the 30-day countdown. If you don't put a date, they can say that it was 30 days at any time. So you want to make sure you date the letter. You want to make sure you include all your pertinent information, your name, your address, your email, your date of birth, your social security number, your driver's license number, the credit bureau name, and the credit bureau address. Once again, you want to say in the subject line that you're disputing items in your credit report. And you basically say, I am requesting a re-investigation of the following data that appears on my credit report. On date such and such, your company responded and stated that the data which appears below is verifiable and therefore cannot be deleted. At this time, I ask you to provide all the supporting documentation and information on how you arrived at that conclusion. This is my request and right under FCRA Section 611. You then go on to list the disputed item or items, and you state your reason why it's an error. Additionally, you want to supply a copy of the credit report or credit reports. You want to provide items proving your identity, and you want to include supporting documentation that proves your case, which is the item is not mine. So this is the second letter that you send out if the credit bureau comes back and says the account is yours. This is the same letter that credit repair specialist that you are paying $100 a month is doing. There is no magic fairy dust by that credit repair specialist. I have friends that are in that business, but it's smoke and mirrors, folks. The law has rights and processes that if you, as an individual consumer, employ, you can do just as good or even better as that person that you're paying $100 a month. Do credit bureaus call consumers? No. The credit bureau will never call you. They'll never contact you. They, in turn, expect you to call them. The credit bureau is not a collector. The collector is a separate private agency that has been hired by the creditor to collect on a bad debt. Back in the 90s, the typical pay ratio was 80-20. 80% of any amount collected went to the creditor, and 20% goes to the collector. So if you owe somebody $100 and you don't pay it, and then you eventually pay it because a collector is harassing you and calling you, $80 goes back to the original account, and $20 is pocketed by the collector. But in general, no. Credit bureaus will not call consumers. Now, credit bureaus do have identity theft services and alert monitoring services, as we found out in last week's episode. And they will contact you when they see funny business going on your credit report. And they can do that over text, over email, over snail mail. That's probably the only time that a credit bureau will actually contact you. When they actually see funny business going on and they feel the need to actually let you know what's going on. But no, the credit bureau does not call consumers. So after the 611 letter, you have another option, which is the 623 dispute letter. And basically the 623 dispute letter, which references section 623 of FCRA, is a last-ditch attempt to remove a record. Once you have gone through the process of sending the original dispute letter, or you send a 609 letter, or a 611 dispute letter, you can contact the data furnisher to prove that the debt belongs to you or it doesn't. This is known as debt validation and generally only applies to disputes by a third-party debt collection. So just like the previous letters, you want to include a date. That's always important. You want to include your personal information, including your social security number, your driver's license number, the creditor or the collection agency, and of course the address of that collection agency. You want to once again say that you're disputing your credit report items, and you start off with a section that says, I am requesting an investigation following the data that appears on my credit report. Specifically, I'm disputing the records that your company is sending to the credit reporting agencies, which I disputed this record with the credit bureaus. They stated that the information was verified. However, because credit reporting agencies often use software that doesn't provide complete investigations, I am disputing information directly with you. This is my right under Section 623 of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. If you cannot perform this type of investigation or locate all of the records to investigate this dispute, please update the credit bureaus to remove the information. I am also asking that you send your method of investigation along with all the records as well as the documentation that proves the account belongs to me, so that I can in turn conduct my own investigation. After that, you want to include as much information about the disputed item, the name of the company, the address, the company phone number, the account number, reasons why you believe it's an error, and then you want to include the copy of the credit report, the items proving your identity, and then of course documentation to prove your case. There's a question online with regards to how do you know if a collector call is legit? And the answer is you don't. Whatever you do, for any call you receive, don't give out your personal information, because you don't know whether that person is a true collector here in the United States, or whether it's an Indian or Chinese or Russian hacker who is pretending to be a collector and is trying to fish for your personal information so they can go on to open up, credit accounts in your name. So whatever you do, be very wary of the calls that you get. In my opinion, don't take any calls. In this day and age, you don't know who the hell you're talking to. It could be anybody. And so for that reason alone, don't take the call. Screen the call. Make sure that they leave a voicemail. And then once you've got a phone number, you can use tools online to verify the source of that phone number. A lot of times, though, they use burner phones or phones that disable caller ID services so that you can't tell who's calling you. So, in my opinion, don't take the call. Because you don't know in the very end if the person is a true, legitimate collector, if that makes any sense. They're not the good guys. They're not the good guys. So in my opinion, my advice, don't take the call. Alrighty, and our next section is some tips when it comes to disputing items on your credit report. You want to pay attention to the evidence that you include and provide records to back up your claim. You just can't bullshit your way and say it's not mine. You need to provide evidence that what you're telling them, that the account is not yours, is true. And there are legitimate reasons. There are people that have very common names. They have father and son. One's a senior, one's a junior. I can tell you that in my case, there's like 3 or 4 people in Brownsville alone that have my name. And sadly, some of them are criminals. So you can easily get confused, or you could be confused with someone else who has a similar name to you. Your son could also end up not paying a bill, and instead of it showing up on his credit report, it shows on yours because you share a common first name and last name. Try not to use form letters from the internet or the credit bureaus. Make them sound like you wrote them. Yes, they can be, especially when you can't understand them. But it's just not them. There's Chinese call centers and collection agencies. I've yet to hear a Russian one, but they're coming soon probably. But try not to use a standard letter. Make it sound genuine and that it's actually coming from you. You want to dispute errors that are real. Don't try to get the credit bureau to take off valid and legitimate items. If you didn't pay it and you know you didn't pay it, don't try to wiggle your way and hope and pray that the credit bureau will look the other way. That's never going to happen. So if you really want to pay your debt, pay it. But just remember that it may not be taken off the credit report for an additional 7 years. You have to make the judgment call. You do. So that's just something you really need to get the point across. Because I know that in the last episode, I kind of talked about when to pay it and not to pay it. But once again, it just depends. But at the same time, if you owe it, you owe it, it's yours, pay it, get it over and done with. At most, get a letter from your creditor saying it's paid in full. So if you go out, get a car, get a house, apply for a loan, get an apartment, buy a condo, get insurance, you can at least have proof that you've been responsible enough to take care of the debt. And here you go, Mr. Creditor. Here's proof that I've paid my debt. It won't come off my credit report, but yes, it was delinquent, but I took responsibility and I paid the account out. And of course, you always want to ask for the error to get deleted or updated. You don't just want to send a letter and say, I don't agree with it. If you're going that far, request for it to be deleted. Don't request for it to be updated, because it's going to show updated but still late pay. If you want to get it off, get it removed. Request a deletion, not an update. Well, in the last episode, I briefly talked about the moral thing to do and the right thing to do, and I have a theory on that. It's my own theory. People can judge me one way or the other. But there's a difference between the moral thing to do and the right thing to do. The moral thing to do is to pay your debts, always. But the right thing to do, which includes the smart thing to do, especially if you're on year 5, year 6, and year 7, and you're concerned that this bad debt will affect your ability to obtain credit, be it a house, a car, a loan, or purchasing insurance, and you're at year 5, 6, or 7, you're better off leaving it alone and letting it drop on its own. Because the moment that you wiggle it, that date of last activity will generate that record for an additional 7 years. And that's not what you were trying to do. You were trying to remove it so that in the future you would not be affected when going out and applying for credit. So it's a judgment call. And it has to do with the smart thing to do, not necessarily the moral thing to do. So the next tip is that you want to dispute one error at a time, or just a few at a time. I mean, if you've got a crap load of bad debts, well, it's obvious that you had never any intention of paying your bills, okay? So I think it's going to be a little harder for you to prove your case unless somebody really stole your identity and opened up a shitload of accounts and they're not yours, they never paid them, and now it's on your credit report. But you want to throw a chunk of them at a time to the credit bureau, because you'll give them information overload. And chances are you're not going to be successful at removing any of them. So you want to group them. Maybe the most critical ones. Credit cards would be a top one. Loans are a top one. Medical debts, you could probably leave that second or third. A lot of places don't even look at medical debts when it comes to looking at your credit. In fact, a lot of times they've ignored medical debt for the most part. So that's overlooked. So you want to start off with the big ones first, followed by the second most important, and then lastly, all the ones that are dangling out there. But if possible, if you've got one or two, start with the first one, see how successful you are, and then if that works, then go for the next one. It's really a process of elimination. As I mentioned before, you want to send whatever letter via certified mail, and you want to ask with a return receipt with a signature. That's very important. That way you have a signature of an employee at the credit bureau that signed for it. It may not be the analyst that works on your case. Chances are it's the mail boy working in the mail room receiving all the mail. But it's still his signature, and he is an employee of the credit bureau. So if for some reason you call the credit bureau or contact the credit bureau a couple of weeks after sending the letter and you haven't heard anything back and they come back and say, nope, we never got it, you can show them proof that yes, they did, and John Smith signed for it. So make sure you send everything by certified mail and you include a return receipt with signature. And lastly, you want to keep records of all the correspondence you send to the credit bureaus on an account basis. You want to do that because if they drop the ball somewhere, you've got proof from the get-go that you started this dispute months ago, and they've had opportunities to review it, and they've done diddly squat. So it's important that you keep all your records all the time, and you file them somewhere. Now, if for some reason you feel that you are a victim of identity theft, you need to report that immediately. So if you know somebody stole your identity, you need to react immediately. You need to alert the credit bureaus that somebody has opened accounts in your name, and you need to do that right away. Because if you sit on the fence and you think that somehow the credit bureau is going to find out and take care of it for you, the answer is no. Wishful thinking. You need to report identity theft immediately. No ands, ifs, or buts. So those are the tips and the methods on pursuing derogatory items on your credit report. It's something that you yourself can do. You don't have to go out to a credit repair specialist to get this done and pay them hundreds and thousands of dollars for something that you as a consumer are entitled to do on your own. They don't have magic fairy dust. They don't have brujeria. They don't have a magic wand. These credit repair specialists are basically taking advantage of the law as it's written that says, if somebody sends me a letter disputing an item on a report, I have exactly 30 days to respond. Not 29, not 31, not the first day of the next month, but 30 days. And if there is no response within 30 days, by law, that item must be removed from your credit report. And that's one of the reasons why these credit repair specialists agencies come about. They come about because they know the law and they know how to take advantage of people by using the time periods established in the law. There is no special fairy dust. There is no brujeria. There is no wand. It's basically looking at the law and taking advantage of the law. And that's what they're doing. and they're doing it and taking your money. They're charging you $100 a month to do absolutely nothing but sit behind a computer with a printer, print these standard form letters, send them out for 57 cents, whatever first class talk costs these days, and responding accordingly. So save yourself your money and do it yourself. Is Credit Karma safe? I've used Credit Karma before. Seems to be alright. They're pretty legit. So with that said, folks, this pretty much covers the hour here for today's episode. I really wish we would have had my co-host with me. It's always fun to have him. But unfortunately, he had another commitment to take care of. And I've done this show once or twice on my own, so I can pretty much do it. But I like having people around. I thank the viewers out there that posted some really good questions. I hope this episode was beneficial. And we'll see you next week on the next episode. Thank you.